Thank you for being here, and welcome everyone who's joining us on live stream. And I also appreciate those of you who have your video turned on. It's much easier for me to talk to faces than to boxes without faces on it. So thank you for those of you who are joining us here with your video. And if you're able to, I encourage you to do that. Let me change. And as Warren said in the introduction, the title of the talk that I have set for today is Realizing the Four Noble Truths. The Chan Practitioner, and this part 2, I think it's not going to be done. There's a lot of things going on in this set of teachings, and we'll see where we can get to today. If for those of you who were here last time, you might remember me talking about the importance of understanding what the first noble truth means correctly. And the first noble truth, that there is suffering. And it's quite important to get the wording right, as sometimes it is it's articulated as life is suffering, that gives us the impression that, oh, this is so like pessimistic and everything is terrible. No, actually what the Buddha tried to share with us is that, yeah, but that there is suffering in our life. Do we know that? And so we talked about how part of having this body as a human being, living as a human being, that we will experience aging, sickness, and death, because this body is impermanent. And these are what the Visuddhimagga called the basis for suffering. What it is referring to is that when we fail to see and recognize the body as impermanent and react with aversion when the body changes and deteriorates, that we turn it into suffering. So the changes of the body as we go through aging and death, it's not easy. They can be difficult sensations, but it does not need to be suffering. And I'd like to talk a bit more about other bases for suffering that the sutra has mentioned. This has to do with living in relationship with others in the world as a human being. So what were listed, that we are familiar with, being separated from what we love. And we relate to that, being separated from what we love. And also being stuck with what we dislike, being stuck with like things going on around us that we don't like, or people we have difficult relationship with, or difficult people, right? And not getting what we want. So I think everyone can relate to these in one way or the other, because we from our interaction with the world, with our environment, with other human beings. And again, these are like sickness, old age, and death, basis for suffering, meaning that they're not automatically suffering, but it has to do with our habitual reactivity with vexation that turn them into suffering. So let's think about our experience. So it is like we may have relationship with something in our life that we love. So I live in a house that had beautiful sunsets. And when I see a beautiful sunset, it's beautiful with all the changing colors, with the pattern of cloud in the sky, and because of impermanence, like the sunset will not just stay there in the sky forever. It keeps changing, and eventually the sky become dark. And so, because of impermanence, whatever we love and enjoy change, and eventually they will this view that we enjoy so much will be gone, and thus the state of what's called the separation from what we love. And it is part of living in impermanence. And imagine the sunset just kind of being stuck in the sky. It's like that forever, right? It's just like we may get tired of it after a while. But so if we remember that every moment is brand new, then we will remember to enjoy what is right here in front of us with full presence, and we feel the happiness, the joy, the love, and also like the gratitude for the good fortune of being here in this moment to enjoy this, and be with each moment of the sunset as it is. And we will see how it changes in color. The sky get darker and darker. And when the sun is fully set and the sky turns dark, there is no sense of discontent. It's just, oh, like feeling so grateful for having the opportunity to witness this beautiful earth. Like we can be alive to experience this, not suffering, not suffering. And now you would think, okay, I can get this, the sunset, like being separated from the sunset does not need to be suffering. Now, of course, it may be a bit more difficult when it is a loved one that we are separating from, right? Many of us had these experience. I myself experienced this quite a lot because most of my family still live in Hong Kong, and my brother lives on the West Coast, and so it takes a lot of causes and conditions coming together for us to come together. And I think the last few years during the pandemic helped us appreciate that also, that to be able to spend time together, share time together in a relationship, enjoy each other's company, takes a lot of causes and conditions coming together. Right? And when causes and conditions do come together, allowing us to be together, to enjoy each other's company, we're happy. And yet, because of impermanence, invariably causes and conditions change, and the time we have to with each other will now come to an end. And now, if it's someone you love very much, you care about very much, naturally, there will be some perhaps some feeling of sadness in the moment of separation, the some tears maybe when it's time to say goodbye and see and not, because I do try at the airport, for example, and this we can experience these sadness in moments of separation precisely because we are blessed with having people we love in life. If we don't care about these people, we won't feel sad when we have to say goodbye with them. Right? And if we remember impermanence and remember to recognize how amazing it is that causes and conditions come together for us to spend time with each other, then we will make good use of the time we have when we are together. Right? When we'll be we will be able to remember to be fully present with the people as they are, and remember to give rise, cultivate loving kindness, unconditional kindness. Sometimes they may be doing something that annoys you, but instead of just kind of dwelling on that and be mad, it's like, oh, like we are still able remember to see that person fully as they are, and enjoy, fully appreciate the wonderful causes and conditions that allow us to be together. And instead of taking the time we have together for granted. So when we, when the time we have to be with together each other come to an end, there's no regret, because we have fully experienced, enjoy every moment. Enjoy in the sense that, like, not taking the time we have together for granted. And there's no regret. We feel, truly feel the blessing and gratitude that we can share time together. So, because we recognize how amazing it is, the causes and conditions come together is a miracle. And perhaps we can also see that, yes, in order for us to be able to share time together again, I need to do my part to cultivate the causes and conditions to be able to get together again. I don't know if you know how many times you've been in situations like you you meet or spend time with someone you know for a long time, or like some family member, and it's so wonderful, and then it's like, we need to do it more often. It's like the next time you do it like 10 years later or something like that. It's like, actually, when we uh, recognize how special it is to have the causes and conditions come together, we fully enjoy it. And if this is something that we value, then that means we don't take it for granted. These causes and conditions don't just happen. We cultivate the causes and conditions, maybe by taking the time to maintain the relationship, and find a time, perhaps prioritize it, to so that we can visit, we can find a way to get together. And so these relationship with people that we care about need not be suffering. Yet that's not how we usually are with the people we love. Our default is to forget impermanence, forget how many causes and conditions need to come together for us to be with each other. So when we are with our loved one, we forget it's made possible by the coming together of many, many, many causes and conditions. Think about it, like if especially we ever travel to see our loved one, like we have to be healthy to do that, and traveling being possible, we have experienced that not being possible, but we just don't think about it. Oh yes, like it's always there. And of course, the life situation, or for us, everyone involved, allow us to gather to share this time. If you think about times of trying to get a group of friends, old friends together, or family coming together, you will recognize that how many causes and conditions need to come together for it to happen. It practically is a miracle that every time we can be together with someone. And when we forget, we take this for granted. We take this for granted. And so when we're together, we nitpick something about somebody. It's like, why wouldn't you do this? Why can't you do what I want you to do? And or more commonly, also when we finally get together, you might remember, like, during the holiday season, for example, we might travel long distance, drive or fly, and we are in the same place. And yet we occupy ourselves with something else. Like we're all sitting in the living room together. It's like everyone's looking at the phone, trying to uh, connect with someone who's not here with us, because we take this moment of our sharing space together for granted. We forget what a miracle it is that we can be here in this moment together. And sort of deep down in us, we just assume, we may not be conscious of this assumption, we assume that this will be here, this will always be here. We forget impermanence. And then when it's time to say goodbye, we're upset. It's like, what? Like we are all upset that, we feel like we didn't get what we are supposed to get. It's like, well, I travel all this, and that's it. We feel dissatisfied, and we would just feel this sense of being cheated and feel regrets. Like we feel we didn't make good use of the time. And this reminds me of the time I spent with my niece and nephew. So I would go and visit my family in Hong Kong, and I have a nephew who, like all human beings, right, forget impermanence. And so when I was there, he forgot that, I'm not going to be there forever. And so to kind of like just kind of take it for granted and go off and do whatever. And then the day before I left, it's like, you're leaving tomorrow? And he's get very upset. He get very upset. It's like, why do you have to leave? I was like, well, I have to come back, and I have to work, and I have to, like, I spend all this time with you, and I have to go home and spend time with Uncle David now. He's like, well, he said, you just call Uncle David that you can just Zoom with him. You don't need to go back to the US. So you stay here, right? And of course, suffer the whole day, and all the way I had this glum face traveling to the airport. That's the suffering of separation from our loved one. And it's not because of the separation per se, but it is because we haven't recognized and remember impermanence and make good use of the time we have when we have the opportunity to be with the other person. So, of course, you may think it is just, he's a kid, he doesn't know better. Do we know better now that we are older? Do we do the same thing? So it is just more transparent when a child is expressing that suffering, that sentiment. So in our practice, we pay attention to how we suffer, to our suffering, so that we can see that it is our habitual reactivity, our habitual tendency to forget impermanence, that is the cause of our suffering, that bring this separation from our loved one, turn it into suffering. It is not the separation from the loved one per se that is suffering. So the reason why I want to talk about it is because it is very important to understand correctly what suffering means when it comes to our relationship with the world, with people and things we love. It is not having these relationships with others per se that is suffering. It is our tendency, our very entrenched habit to forget that everything is impermanent, that turns these opportunities to be with our loved ones into suffering. It is important to clarify this in our mind to see if we have kind of muddled them together. Otherwise, we may inadvertently make the mistake of believing that it is our relationship with others that causes suffering. And when we have this erroneous view that, oh yeah, like, it is the relationship we have others that, like, we love these people, we have loved ones. That is, then of course, because we're loved one, we will be separated from them. Then we get it in our mind that, well, I know how to avoid suffering. How do I avoid suffering? Well, how do I solve the problem of suffering? Avoid relationship. Avoid loving anyone. I'll avoid the situation where there's someone I love that I be separated from. Then I can avoid suffering. It is not uncommon, unfortunately, to fall into this erroneous view with the misbelief that if we keep other people at arm's length, avoid forming close relationship with others, then we will not find ourselves being in a situation of having to be separated from loved one, because we don't allow ourselves to form emotional bond with others. Now, when we do not allow ourselves to feel loved for another person, even when it's someone close in our lives, like our partner, our parents, maybe children, because of the misbelief that is suffering, having close loved ones and be separated from them. And we believe that the practice is to stay away from the world, stay away from other people, to refrain from forming a close relationship, to refrain from even just getting involved, refrain from social interaction. And I said it's not uncommon, because a lot of people believe that this that's what practitioners do. We just kind of stay away from the world, kind of disengage, and that's good practice. They believe that's good practice. And I mentioned this because I would like to invite you to investigate, to examine if you have traces of this kind of mindset. And if you already have this view in your mind, like to avoid social forming a close relationship, then it can be strengthened by an incorrect understanding of why we keep silence and refrain from social interactions in retreat practice. So for those of you who have been in retreats, might notice that one of the common aspects of a retreat practice, for one, is to isolate ourselves from our daily life, like no phone call, no texting, and just like to be away from the world. Actually, really is just to give us a period of time to engage in the practice. And in the retreat, we follow the guideline of silence. And so over the years, in leading Chan retreats, I found that many sincere practitioners, longtime practitioners, have been taking the wrong thing home with them from retreat practice. Uh, We keep silence and refrain from social interaction in retreat to create a simplified environment, an artificially simplified environment, to support our practice so that retreat participant can uh, learn in this simplified environment, can learn how to practice, how to work with the method, how to work with themselves to apply the method, how to work with themselves with their own habitual reactivity to integrate charm practice of maintaining moment to moment clear awareness, both in sitting and in all the activities in our daily life. That is the reason why we maintain silence and refrain from social interaction in retreat practice. Now, practitioners who already have in their mind that believing with the belief that practice is about avoiding relationship with others. And really, I think we have this. Isn't that the saying? Other people is your suffering or something like so. We have this floating in our culture. That believing the practice about avoiding relationship with others, then will misinterpret. I mean, this practice of refraining from social interaction in retreat practice as this is the right way to live. Like in order to practice, that's how, like, stay away from like other people, stay away from the world, isolate myself. And this all makes sense because like if I do that, then I won't experience the pain of being separated from what loved ones because I don't have anyone I love. I don't need to deal with the pain of being separated from them. And also because I avoid other people, I don't have people I have difficult relationship with, so I don't have to deal with the pain of being with people with whom we have difficult relationship with because I don't have relationship with anyone. We realize that all makes sense. That sounds like a perfect solution to the quote unquote problem of suffering. And believing that is the way to end suffering. That's why it's important to have a correct understanding of what the Buddha's teaching in the Four Noble Truths is about. That the fact of living in the world of with others, that there's impermanence. It brings about situation where we will experience separation from loved one, but it is not by eliminating the ingredients of living as a human being that is the path to it. Bring cessation to suffering. It is not by unlearning the habits of reacting with vexation, by remembering impermanence, that we can be free from suffering. Suffering is not something that's already there we try to get rid of. It is the coming together of the present moment situation with our unhelpful habits of reacting with vexations. So the practice, it's about unlearning the habits of reacting with vexations, not about getting rid of parts of our life as a human being. Of course, if you avoid relationship, you may be able to avoid the aggravation of dealing with other people. But we are also depriving ourselves of the opportunity to be touched by others' love, to allow the tenderness of our heart to be felt when we love and care about another person. Meaning we are depriving ourselves of the experience to be fully human. It is by avoiding relationship also perpetuates the erroneous view that we can isolate ourselves from the world, we can separate ourselves from the world, forgetting that we are all interconnected. We are deeply dependent on everyone else in the world. Every moment of our existence, even though when we are like by ourselves in a room, like in the far corner of the world, we are still touched by everyone, what they do, what they do not do. Every moment of our existence co-created by everyone, an entire universe. And when we remember that, we will be able to see that this notion of our being able to separate ourselves in order to avoid suffering is the erroneous view. And also, people in our life, we have family, maybe we have parents, we may have siblings, we may have some of us have partners, we may have children, we have friends, neighbors. When we try to isolate ourselves from the world, we leave them feel unloved and rejected. So they're looking at this person who just refused to see them and engage with them. I remember this watching this video of a psychological experiment of babies who were looking at caretaker who deliberately refused to show any emotion with them. And the baby got very agitated and just really began to freak out. And so our refusal to engage with others in insisting and isolating ourselves from the world actually cause suffering to others. Instead of bringing benefits to the world through our practice, including those in our life, we are perpetuating erroneous view of the belief that we are separate from the world, and as a result cause harm and pain to others. Chan practice is to be fully engaged in life. So if causes and conditions bring us into relations with others, maybe we have being parents or we have siblings, our parents give us siblings. So like that's part of our life. And I know of people who in their 60s, they're still resenting their parents for having younger siblings. So that's our causes and conditions. That's part of our life. and because and conditions bring us children, friends. For me, lots of nieces and nephews, co-workers, neighbors. As practitioner, we can use these relationships as opportunity to practice cultivating loving kindness, cultivating unconditional kindness to ourselves and others, through our interaction to recognize our tendency to turn them into suffering. We're so good at that. And to as opportunity to recognize how in many different ways we turn our interactions with other people into suffering, so that we have the opportunity to unlearn these habits without knowing what these unhelpful habits are. How are we supposed to unlearn them? So by fully engaging in life with others, that becomes our path. So after all, even if we isolate ourselves, we move to, I don't know, Montana, right? To be away from others, you may still have a relationship with your idea of the world and generate suffering, can't you? We're living with our idea of other people being a certain way. They are terrible. They are dangerous. There are no people around you at all. We can still live with our idea of someone in our mind. And for example, someone can live with the idea of someone they hate in their mind, who's not here. And sometimes that person is not even alive anymore. They're still suffering from the from the relationship that they have with this person in their mind, feeling that they are stuck with someone they don't like. It's like that person is not even here. They're not even alive. So who is generating the suffering? Are we kidding ourselves by believing that I just need to get rid of relationships, not be in relationship, isolate ourselves, that we can escape suffering? Check to see if we have this kind of ideas in our mind and recognize how we perpetuate a erroneous view, and forgetting how we are truly interconnected. And it does not need to be our relationship with someone, our idea of someone we don't like. How about our relationship with ourselves? Do we suffer from not being with the version of ourselves we love? We have an idea of how we are supposed to be, and how we used to be, and I'm not that person anymore. Like, it can have to do with aging. Like, don't have the same ability, don't look the same, and so we feel the pain of being separated from the version of ourselves we love. And when we forget impermanence, suffer. When we do not see what it is that we are doing, holding on to a certain idea of who we are supposed to be. That's what suffering is. How about the other aspect of our relationship with ourselves? That we feel stuck with what we hate about ourselves. It doesn't even need to involve another person. Like, there's this, get it in our mind that there is this certain moment of our experience, our action that we are not so proud of, and that's me. And we reify this relationship with that part of ourselves, that version, the moment of ourselves, and have this relationship of aversion. We don't have a relationship with another person, with this ourselves. So if we believe we can just avoid relationship to avoid suffering, recognize what an erroneous view it is. And it's not helping us to gain the insights into how we generate suffering, the various way vexations arise, so that we can actually release these habits. So it is also important to look into, to examine how we understand the basis for suffering. That's known as not getting what we want. So we've been talking about being separated from loved ones and being stuck with those with whom we have difficult relationship with. And there's this bit about this part of life not getting what we want. Well, it is part of our life. It is part of life, living as human beings, that we sometimes do not get what we set out to achieve. Perhaps we can all relate to that in one way or the other. So there might be career goals that we set out to achieve. We didn't quite get that, what we wanted. Or we work very hard to be recognized for our hard work, for our contribution, and but we didn't get the recognition that we were hoping for. Maybe we were work very hard to make our relationship into a certain way, right? So we, for example, work very hard to be, a good friend, and then like, well, that friend doesn't seem to recognize what a good friend you are, or like want to be in a, a good, like a best friend, close relationship with you. Or if you have children, like you try to work very hard to be like a good parent, so that your pet children will get along. But then somehow they just don't get along. We don't get what we want. Or maybe we're in a relationship with the partner, and we try to work very hard and want this to be a relationship of a certain form. Like, for example, like we communicate a lot. We talk about everything. But we don't, like, because the other person is not as communicative as we would like. We just don't get, we don't always get what we want. So we may work very hard and have the skill, talent, or experience to achieve a goal. Yet, what we need to remember is what we do is only part of the causes and conditions for something to happen. Other people are involved, in case we've forgotten. We have a tendency to think that I want this a lot. I really want this, and I'm working very hard. This has to happen. Well, it's like the universe does not cooperate, or we forget that other people are involved. Everything that happens is the coming together of many, many causes and conditions. What we do may be a good big part of it, but like it also involve what other people do and what they do not do. When we live in a very self-centered way, we tend to completely just ignore that. We only notice all the things that we do that make something happen, and what other people do, what they contribute, or what they do not do. For example, they do not obstruct our effort. that's invisible to us. And of course, circumstances, what's happening in the world. I think nowadays, with all the rapid changes in everything, maybe your plan would work last year. Maybe the new situations in our economy, in the state of the world nowadays, it won't work. So, for example, a lot of people's plans were disrupted by COVID. We just met recently someone who told us how he was growing a business for 10 years and was really doing well in 2019, and was like seeing it growing and having more branches, and now that business is closed down. So obviously he knew what he was doing, very good at it, and was working very hard, and other causes and conditions did not come together. In other words, because everything's coming together of many causes and conditions, and quite a bit of it we have no control over. That means living as a human being, not getting what we want in a way is normal. Considering how many causes and conditions need to come together for something to happen. This make me think about my book project that Warren was talking about in the introduction. We started before COVID, and then the editor who was working with me, of course, was not really able to work like many people because of COVID. Like she lost the space, she had to do her work, and then her best friend died suddenly. It was very difficult for her to do work, and I had health challenges. There's issues at the publisher, all kinds of things happening, lots of hiccups. And so I guess it will get published in October. We'll see, like if causes and conditions come together. And of course, it can be published and nobody buys the book, right? Nobody reads it, nobody likes it, nobody finds it useful. Who knows? And but like I can only do my best on my part. So, and recognizing fully that other causes and conditions need to come together for it to materialize as well. When we pursue anything, remembering that everything is the coming together of causes and conditions, which is the true nature of reality. Then when we get the result that we want, we recognize what a miracle it is, instead of taking it for granted. And when we recognize it as really a miracle, then naturally gratitude for all the causes and conditions, and recognizing what everyone had done to co-create this would arise. It's not a sort of a contrived pretending to be grateful. It's like, yes, it's amazing that this actually happens at all. And when we can pursue anything in our life with this in mind, remembering this, yes, we already do our best, and when we don't quite get what we had hoped for, and when we do not have the correct understanding, however, that not getting what we want per se need not be suffering, and instead see not getting what we want as a problem to be solved. It's like, it's a problem. Okay, like it's suffering. It's a need to be solved. And some people I have met, good number of them, may go about solving this problem of not getting what we want because they believe that is the problem here, that's suffering. They solve the problem by not trying to achieve anything. If I don't have something that I want, then I will not be dealing with the situation of not getting what I want. And that seems like to be a very clever solution to the problem, like to want nothing, want nothing, want to do nothing in life, like, and actually mistake it as good practice. Well, you may think like, isn't that right? Like not wanting anything, not wanting to achieve anything. Well, imagine if that is how Master Shen Yan practiced. Just want nothing, want to do, don't want to, don't try to achieve anything. So I don't need to deal with the situation of not getting what I set out to achieve. Then, of course, that means he wouldn't have tried to go on a solitary retreat when he was able to return to monastic life again, to engage in a period of deep practice. He wouldn't try to go and pursue a doctorate degree in Japan to get his education. He wouldn't bother with trying to build Dhammadra Mountain. It's like, what if I don't get what I want? I wouldn't bother with building DDRC, the retreat center in New York. Then, of course, we wouldn't have these places to practice. We wouldn't have the Dharma teaching we got from him. However, some practitioners mistake not wanting to achieve anything in life for good practice. They think of it, oh, I don't have desire. I don't, that's good practice. At least to avoid the suffering of not getting what you want. Because they believe not getting what you want is suffering itself. Instead of recognizing correctly that it is our forgetting impermanence and the emptiness, that everything's coming together of causes and conditions that bring about suffering, not not getting what we want per se. So I want to talk about this to bring it to your attention, to see so that you can check to see if you have traces of this kind of thinking, because it may show up as you're not giving it a go, even though you have the talents and ability and opportunity to pursue something. If we have the talent and ability that can be applied to achieve something, and causes and conditions are such that our skills, our talents are needed, then wouldn't we be depriving others, depriving the world of what we have to offer? Because we want to avoid the pain of not getting what we want. We want to avoid the disappointment. And that would not be in accordance with compassion. We give it a go, fully engage, and in the process, we learn and grow. And we see that, oh, yes, I do suffer. I do generate suffering when I don't get what I want. Instead of convincing ourselves, I don't suffer. I don't suffer because we avoid the situation. When that means we won't be able to unlearn the unhelpful habits of vexation when we are faced with the situation of not getting what we want. So what I've been talking about is to help us make sure we understand what the first noble truth is, that there is suffering. Um, Getting it clearly established in our mind that living with this body and in the world, in relations with others, the true nature of which is impermanence, that will be experiences of difficulties such as aging and sickness, death, separation from loved ones, being with something we don't like someone we have a difficult relationship with, maybe because we disagree with them, and sometimes we don't get what we want. But pain and misfortune need not be suffering. It is our inability to recognize and fully accept that everything, without exception, is the coming together of causes and conditions, and it's impermanent. And when we forget that, we are compelled to react with vexations, aversion and craving, aversion to what we don't like, craving more of what we like, wanting it to be permanent. That this vexation, this reactivity with vexation, is what brings suffering. So Buddhist practice, including Chan practice here, is about realizing that this is so, that living with this body in relationship in the world, that we will encounter difficulty, challenges, and cultivate clear awareness of how our entrenched habits of reacting to the present moment with vexation shows up thought after thought, how entrenched it is. Instead of thinking that, no, I don't really do that. Like, I only do it once in a great while. So that we can actually see how these habits show up and unlearn them, release them. And until we release all the habits of the suffering, attain Buddhahood, then there will still be suffering. But like as we practice, there will be less suffering. So the question is, are we aware of our suffering, aware how we generate suffering? And well, sometimes it is pretty obvious that we are suffering. Like, so for example, when we are sick, when we wake up with a headache, there's back pain, in this period of the year, allergy season, very stuffy as nose, like the swelling feeling in the sinus with the headache, that there's a physical discomfort from that, and it is our habitual reactivity of thinking this shouldn't be happening, forgetting that every moment's coming together of causes and conditions that compel us to react habitually with aversion to the present moment, and that is suffering. So actually, allergy season, for example, great opportunity to practice recognizing how we suffer, because we also forget impermanence, forget that every moment's coming together of causes and conditions. Or for example, maybe some of us have had recently or not so recently encountered the death of a loved one. And when we forget impermanence, forget that time we share with each other is a miracle, it's the coming together of many causes and conditions, then we wouldn't accept it. We find ourselves believing that this is wrong, this shouldn't be happening. We find people to blame. blame everyone else, blame the universe, just blame something. That's a habitual reactivity of aversion to the fact of impermanence that is part of living with a body that someone we love, however much we love them, they too have a body that will deteriorate. And when we forget that, refuse to accept this, that's how we end up finding ourselves suffering a great deal. Adding suffering to the natural experience of deep sadness when we lose someone we love. So this is the kind of suffering that's called suffering of suffering, dukkha. And it is the suffering that is aversion to painful feeling, physically painful feeling, or emotionally painful feeling of deep sadness of being separated from our loved one. So there's the and when we allow this physical or emotional pain, for example, emotional pain of deep sadness when we are separated from a loved one, when we allow them to be fully experienced moment to moment, we will be able to recognize and see for ourselves that, like everything else, it arises and perishes. It's constantly changing. And when we experience these physical or emotional pain as it is, we realize impermanence. Like it is it painful when we experience it? Yes. We're not pretending that like a pain in our back, it's that's not there. It's like, but are we adding to it by turning it into suffering? Or in the sutra, it talk about how there are two things that happen. One is the painful feeling itself, and then we create mental pain. That is the suffering by giving rise to aversion, reacting with aversion, believing that this shouldn't be suffering. I hate it. That is the suffering of suffering. When we forget impermanence and forget to fully experience what's happening moment to moment as it is, then we fall into the habits, the very, very entrenched habits of turning this experience of pain into a fixed entity. So we may be able to relate to that quite readily. There's this physical sensations we call pain, and then we turn it into a fixed entity, and it becomes your enemy. Hate it, trying to fight against it. And then of course it just generate more tension in the body and would generate more of the painful sensation. Or when it's a situation where we are with someone we don't agree with, we have a difficult relationship with, or we are in a situation where we feel very deep sadness from being separated from someone we love, we turn that, instead of allowing it to be fully experienced as a flow, impermanence, we turn it into a fixed entity in our mind, and hate it because we think it is not, it shouldn't be happening, and hating this unpleasant entity, wanting to get rid of it. That's the suffering of suffering. So like this is the conceptual understanding of how suffering of suffering comes about. And our work, our practice is to recognize how it shows up in our experience, what we do, how do we go about doing this, and see for ourselves that indeed, yes, I do this to generate suffering. And because it is not about recognizing that, oh, I'm so dumb. I couldn't believe I do that, and it's more like, wow, that means it's up to me whether I suffer or not, because what happens with the body, what happens in relationships, not entirely up to me, but like I can choose whether it will be a moment of suffering or not. This reminds me of a story of a longtime practitioner who struggled and suffered a great deal from the feeling of being with people, difficult people. In general, she has this fear of other people, and so what she has done is to pick up the strategy of avoiding dealing with people, like the idea of like, I avoid people, stay away from them, then avoid relationship, then I can avoid the opportunity of suffering from being stuck with people who she has difficulty with. And because she's like the dealing with other people give her anxiety and fear, and it's quite common nowadays. A lot of people have anxiety when we deal with other people, and so she, for many years, chose a lifestyle to avoid interacting with others and lived alone. Chose work that she would do when everyone's gone. She did it in a solitary setting, and she worked very hard with her practice, and was very frustrated because she find that her fear of other people, the suffering, did not disappear. And what it is that she's been living with the idea of people being scary, and held this relationship in her mind, and react to it in her mind. So what happened if you have this experience, you may be able to recognize this. What happened to her was that was holding this distorted view of other people. So, sometimes it's with specific people, and we might maybe you may be able to relate when we have someone in our life with whom we have a difficult relationship. What it is that we have a relationship with our idea of that person, that we have put together in our mind. Our idea of that person consists of moments of difficult interaction with that person. Maybe consists of moment when that person was yelling at you, when consists of the moment when that person was saying very harsh things, moment of that person being very domineering, very demanding, very pushy. It's like a little movie that we have edited, like the result, with a very concentrated moment of like the most negative, difficult interactions. But that is not the reality of that person. That person's not like constantly being nasty. There are many moments of that person just sort of sitting there and not saying any mean thing. And but we hold this an idea of that person in the mind and turn it into a fixed entity, and sort of perpetuate this fear. And that's what happened with this practitioner. And after all these years, she realized that avoiding people didn't free her from suffering. And so she shared with me that she had this recent interaction, and she recognized her tendency to become paralyzed by her fear of other people, because she lived with this ideas, image of other people, and decided that she will not succumb to the same habitual reactivity. So it is from her practice of cultivating clear awareness of what's going on, and also this habit of being paralyzed by fear, and stay with the moment to moment experience despite this intense fear and the strong urge to want to run away to avoid this, and recognize the opportunity, to seize the opportunity to engage with someone who is interacting with her in a way that made her feel this person is being very pushy, and engaging, interacting with her in a way that's uncomfortable for her, and seize the opportunity to suggest a different way of engaging, suggest a different way of communicating, and had a wonderful experience. Realized that it's possible to truly communicate with another person, something she had never been able to do. Realized that it's possible to connect with another person who had a very different communication style. That realized that that person she had generated so much fear about in her mind is not only a pushy, demanding person. Like, this person is also very warm and considerate and thoughtful. Um, in other words, she allowed herself to see the full humanity, that person as they are, fully in that moment, and free herself from the habits of suffering. So I encourage you, if you have the tendency to fall into such habits and experience a great deal of suffering, to give the practice a go, to recognize how your existing strategy may not be working, and come up with the courage to stay with the moment to moment experience, so that we're not stuck with and paralyzed by our fear and thoughts, assumption about a situation, and allow us to see clearly the moment, what can be done. Take a different path. Try the path of not suffering, and see for yourself that it is possible when we do not succumb to our habitual reactivity. And some of you may think that, like, well, yeah, like suffering, but like sometimes it may be very difficult to recognize suffering, especially when we're not dealing with misfortunes, like someone being sick, or a loved one being sick or dying, or we're healthy. Right? There's no sickness, and especially for younger people, and things are actually going well. It's like, I'm not seeing suffering. It's like, work is going very well, accomplishing a lot, and I'm getting promoted, and like my colleagues really like me, and I'm very popular at work. I'm really enjoying my work, and my relationships are going well. It's loving, and I'm happy, and my body's healthy. It's like, where is the suffering? So um and when we think think this, and it's like maybe we are thinking of suffering as only as suffering of suffering, and it's helpful to recognize that what the other kind of suffering, it's called suffering of change, right? That it happens when we forget impermanence, that yes, this moment of everything going so well too is the coming together of causes and conditions. But we have a tendency to forget that. We think, oh yeah, I finally got it. I finally did everything right. This is it. I've arrived at the perfect life, perfect way of working, perfect way to be in a relationship. This is it. I got it. I finally got it. I finally got life. Forgetting that everything is the coming together of constantly changing causes and conditions. When we do that, that we become attached and believe that this this wonderful situation at work or in our relationship or about our body, how we feel in a body, mistakenly believing that this is how life is supposed to be. From now on, I finally got it. It's going to be like this. And of course, inevitably causes and conditions will change. That's the true nature of reality. Then we suffer, feeling that this is not supposed to be happening. I got it. I achieved it. I worked hard. I finally find a way to be with life. So that is the suffering of change. When we are enjoying something in our life, our work, our relationship, our health, well, pay attention to the compulsion to turn it into suffering. How does this compulsion show up? Is this sort of, we crave for it to last forever. We believe this will last forever. It's because I've got it. And maybe that will be accompanied with this like subtle worry that it will end. Like, because we actually, somewhere inside us, we do know impermanence. We just want to forget it. Like maybe this will be exempt, like this. I worked so hard for it, like this will be permanent. We have some secret wish that this can last, but yet we actually know impermanence. So we worry about it ending. And when we worry about it ending, trying to hold on to it, now we are not fully present to enjoy each moment as it is. Suffering, cutting short this enjoyable set of causes and conditions coming together. See, we're really good at generating suffering. So practice, remember that every moment is the coming together of constantly changing causes and conditions. Then we allow us to be grateful, to have this natural, really arising gratitude of the blessing of the moment, and see clearly that we too are part of the causes and conditions, co-creating the next moment for everyone, including ourselves. So how about you remember this? Then we are fully here, fully present. And when we remember this, we refrain from engaging in harmful speech and action. Sometimes when we're worried about some wonderful thing ending, we can do some pretty egregious things. And also instead remember to bring benefits to others, like bring joy, to cultivate loving kindness. And what we're doing is to co-create the next moment, so that we do not become the difficult person that someone else is stuck with, becoming the basis of their suffering. Right? So if we all do this, other people are not doing it to us, then we can all live with less suffering. And whether the other person suffer or not, we cannot control. Yet, we are the first person to benefit. Every moment we remember to practice, we suffer less. And when we suffer less, we are less prone to fall into our unhelpful habits and allow us to remember to co-create the next moments of less suffering, more joy, and not be the difficult person in other people's life, and perhaps be someone who will who bring joy and bring benefits to other people's life. So I hope this is helpful. I was hoping that I could make my talk shorter today and give more Q&A time, but like I think 2 more minutes this time. So thank you very much for your being here.